What's going on, everybody? Ed Ricker here with another Mavic Pro video. Today we're talking about how to get the best cinematic shot and the best look with the color and the video settings of the DJI Go 4 app. And by the way, if you're interested in the equipment that I use with drones or with cameras, check out my new website, edricker.com. It has an FAA commercial drone pilot certification promotional code for the drone pilot ground school, so take advantage of that. All right, guys, let's go outside, open up our app, and see what we can do. At the bottom right of the screen, right before you get to the playback option, you'll see the little sliders there for the camera settings. The very first one that comes up is your ISO and your shutter speed if you're talking about manual. You can also set your camera to auto mode, but I would suggest going to manual and learning those settings. ISO is how bright your drone is making your camera look. So it's adding gain, but it's also adding grain. The higher that you go with the ISO, I keep rhyming. The higher you go with the ISO, the more grain you will introduce into the image. Now, if you're shooting late into the evening, maybe you can't avoid that and you have to go to 800 or 1600 or 3200 ISO just to get a shot at all. But for the most part, you want to avoid going above 800. Now, one way to do that is to raise or lower your shutter speed. You never want to go below twice your frame rate. So we're at 24 frames per second. We don't want to go below 1/50th shutter speed, because otherwise things will get too blurry. You can go higher on the shutter speed, but then you'll get more of a jittery effect. You'll get almost like the video is kind of stuttering as you move through space, and that's because you're reducing motion blur. Now that might be good for action shots, maybe if you're tracking a fast-moving vehicle or something, but if you're trying to get a slower cinematic shot, something that looks like you'd see in a film, you want to make sure you have the low shutter speed of twice your frame rate. Now, to achieve a low shutter speed and a low ISO during the day, you also have to start thinking about maybe applying an ND or a neutral density filter to kind of darken your image so that you can have these low settings like this. Also, just remember that you gotta tap the screen whenever you want to get something into focus. You can't just take off and fly and hit record without selecting where the camera needs to focus. Plus, it doesn't autofocus all the time. You have to make sure that you press again and again wherever you want to with every different shot. Now, I won't talk about video resolution or frame rates in this video because I already made a video that talks about that. So check out that video, but I will talk about white balance in this. So right now I have it set to sunny because it's a little sunny out here. I wouldn't go with auto because auto is going to change if you're shooting different objects or if you're going around maybe into a shady area or a sunny area. Auto white balance may not always be consistent. So if it's a cloudy day, I would suggest doing cloudy. Sunny is sunny. Incandescent if you're indoors, and you can always do custom too. But yeah, try to avoid the auto. It just doesn't seem to work that well for me. Now for style, we have lowered our settings just a little bit. On the custom row, on the left, we have 0.2. So the first 0.2 is for sharpness. Digital video can get really sharp and you can start to see maybe aliasing on the edges of things, but also if you're watching a movie, you don't see anything that sharp. The sharpness is usually a little lower. You can always add sharpness in post-production, but to get a nice cinematic shot, it's not always really mega sharp, you know? The next 0.2 is for our contrast. So how dark are our darks? How light are our lights? You can always add contrast on the computer later, but it's not quite as easy to remove contrast and still look good if you need to. The next one is, I have it set at 0.0, that's our saturation. That's how much color we see in the image, how green the greens are, how blue the blues are. I have that set at 0, but you can always lower that and then add that back later on according to whatever your eye prefers. Having a lower contrast and a lower saturation in your initial image will help you to do better grading in post-production. For color, we are set at none right now, but there are a ton of different color profiles here. Cinelike is great. None I use quite a bit. It says none, but it's awesome. Now, I would suggest if you're really looking to do a lot of post-production grading, that you do not select one of these more complex color profiles and instead do that later on. So you have more of a standard image to work with as opposed to committing to one basically if you're selecting it through the DJI Go 4 app. Our last settings we're going to talk about is we're going to go over to the gear option there. The third on the right, at the top is histogram. I have it on. So histogram, if you see on the lower left, right by the map, it's this right here, this little window, the histogram. And basically here we're going to show how bright our brights are, how dark our darks are. From the left to the right, each of those columns stands for, from the left, your shadows, to the middle, your midtones, and to the right, your highlights. So if we're going to close out this camera settings menu, you see on the left, there are a couple little humps over there on the darker end of the spectrum. Those represent the trees that you see in the image on the left. That also represents the little fence post there on the right and anything toward the bottom of the image. On the right, you see this tall peak. It's like a big spike, and that's in the highlight region. That's actually showing how bright the sky is and the sun is streaming over here onto the lens. So you see that we're actually a little bit blown out, and we could stand to get maybe a little darker. Now I'm gonna adjust the shutter speed just to make things darker really quick for you. And as I make the shutter higher in speed, see how our shadows go up and our sky slowly goes down according to the histogram. You make it go back up, let's go up to a ridiculously high shutter speed, 0.25. Now we have a huge spike on the right and barely any shadows. So you want to make sure that you have something a little more middle ground, something a little more evenly exposed. So that's histogram. I always have histogram on. It's always there. It's really easy to help see if maybe things are well exposed, especially when you're shooting people or cars or objects. Now grid and center point, those are pretty good. Grid lines basically show your rule of thirds. You can see that if you're positioning something in the frame and you want to have it off to the side, maybe get a little bit artistic with something on the right or the left third of the screen, these lines are going to help you determine where those lines are. And then your center point is maybe if you want to make sure you're flying directly towards something or have something directly in the center of the screen, you can select a crosshair and you can see that in the center. That's sometimes helpful if you're tapping the screen to select focus and then you see the autofocus area off to the side. Your mind might get tricked that that's actually the center of where you're flying to. So to have a crosshair might actually help out a little bit. All right guys, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe because I'm doing videos with the Mavic and other types of technology and devices all the time. And if you have something to say or if you have a question, a suggestion, give me a comment. All right guys, thanks for watching.